One of the things I think is interesting is what's going on in Sri Lanka, where you saw a lot of these riots happening just in the past week. And we're seeing it also in Tajikistan, Iran is happening right now, and even in the US, right? Like food shortages, all these things. So I think when you're looking at the global landscape of where to invest, and also, if you're in a place like Sri Lanka, for example, now, where there's riots, they're burning the president's house. There's videos of them taking his like supercars and all pushing them into lakes and things like it's
Really
insane. But
wow.
What is kind of the thesis around Ecuador? Why did you choose Ecuador?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'm living in Brooklyn, New York in 2010, 11, 12, and I'm getting into real estate investing. I was good at it. So, I'm making money. I'm starting to be successful in that. And right as I was about to really, to really rake it in, I started figuring some things out that just sort of made that landscape look worse to me in the future than it had looked prior to me having that information, right? So I'm concerned, I was concerned about the dollar all the way back then, right? I was concerned with potential government restrictions. I was concerned with supply chain stuff. I was concerned with all sorts of things going way back to, 2010, 11, 12. I was getting an MBA at that time, investing in real estate. I had a 5-year-old daughter. We were living that lifestyle, right? I was working, 6 a.m. to literally like 2 a.m., including the MBA stuff. Saw my daughter literally only on the weekends. Did not see her Monday through Friday at all. Paying off debt, doing that whole kind of hamster wheel game. It was going very well, setting myself up. But, one of the sort of thought processes that I went to once I really started to learn the money system, learn money creation, how that all works. One of the things that I remember, one of the thoughts I had is, what are these? I used to invest in brownstones. What are these brownstones worth if there's no functioning debt market? Like if we're just on a straight supply and demand for housing, right? For places to live, and it's a cash market. What does that look like? What is this? This $1 million building that I'm in love with so much. What does this look like in that environment? I don't know, maybe it's worth 30 grand, 60 grand. I don't know. It's certainly not worth, anything close to what it was at that time. And so I started, just looking at the investment landscape all the way back then a little bit differently, being much more interested in what I consider hard assets, right? I don't consider real estate in the US a hard asset because it's completely levered to the debt market. So, if the debt markets are not functioning, you don't have, your value's gone. So I had a whole list of stuff, really personal level, that I wanted to, that mattered to me. So of course, climate, safety. I didn't want to be on any major fault lines. I didn't want to be right next to a volcano. I was interested in the great soil, water, air, year-round growing season, probably a couple of things I'm not remembering. But basically, I didn't want to be right near nuclear, like a nuclear power, nuclear energy, that sort of thing. And so basically, it was the mountains of southern Ecuador that hit on all of that. And so I came down here with a business partner in 2013. That's kind of a funny story too, because I hopped off the plane in 2013. Rafael Correa was president then. He was sort of ideologically aligned with Venezuela and Cuba and China and this sort of thing. I get off the plane, then it took me about 24 hours. I looked at my business partner. I'm like, this is a socialist country. It's going to collapse. We should go somewhere else. But I stayed just because, literally, by shutting off the logical mind and deciding, look, this is where I'm supposed to be, so I'm going to stay. We rode out those very difficult years. And now you're starting to see, what I considered to be the value proposition then, really starting to be understood globally, both by people who want to live here, but also by the investment community. We're now in a place that does have the arable land, very inexpensive inputs on anything you're doing, amazing natural resources, water. Ecuador has just about every natural resource that exists, right? Including all the metals, oil, etc. It's a sparsely populated country. It's very safe. It's very easy to immigrate to. It's very easy to do business in, not the bureaucracy side of things, but there's no barriers to foreigners doing business here, legally speaking. So you can, you don't have to step foot in the country here to operate a business, so on and so forth. And so as the pandemic started and as the government reaction to the pandemic took place globally, people, I think, started to realize that, hey, a place that has, you can grow your food, you're close to your water, it's secure, it has a great climate, there's no winter, you don't have levels of stuff between you and your life, right? It's like if you're in the US, maybe you're eating a chicken from the supermarket in Tennessee. That chicken could have been produced in North Carolina, shipped to China for packaging, and then shipped back to to Tennessee for you to be eating it, right? It's insane. So if you're here, Ecuador imports very little, right? Ecuador is not a country that relies on the global supply chain. Looking at inflation, for example, that's taking place now. The inflation, if it does anything to Ecuador, it benefits it, right? Because Ecuador is exporting agriculture. And so when we're seeing inflation play out in agriculture, that makes people wealthier here because their cost of living is not going up at the same degree that it is in other places, right? So I think we're now, we're starting to see that. It's been a wild ride. I got my butt kicked completely for the first 2 or 3 years as I learned, how to operate here and do business and in a down economy and so on and so forth. But now that we're in this time where the world is waking up to that value proposition, it's really a fun time to be a business owner, investor, so on and so forth in Ecuador.
Definitely. And yeah, that's a great point. I mean, when it comes to food shortages, in places like Egypt, for example, they basically import everything. They have no grain, no natural gas, nothing like that. And you see highly populated cities like Cairo is one of the most densely populated cities. And when something like this happens, it's quite sad, right? And where those people are flocking to now, it's, I think, crossing the Rio Grande, like, just Africa going into Europe, it's like 500,000 a month now. So like the world is changing very fast. And that's where, I see a place like Ecuador, like truly being self-sustainable, right? So in a potential like global collapse or kind of a greater depression, places in South America are quite interesting. And that's why, this year I've kind of devoted to this continent. I'm interested in seeing what's going on in Paraguay and Uruguay, but I was already in Ecuador for a while. And yeah, I mean, you guys are really on top of the market. I was just looking briefly on YouTube, and they have a whole Abundant Living Ecuador YouTube channel. He's documenting the house building process. And also, Jesse, you were at like a gold mine, right? Recently?
That was fun. That was an experience.
That's awesome. And yeah, I mean, those are the type of things where I think a lot of people don't look at that, but also, one of the things in kind of a depression or something like that, people worry about currency collapse. And if you're in agriculture and you have neighbors, well, the simplest form of trade is just reciprocity, right? So in some places like, there really isn't US dollars. It's a big problem with, international trade. If you don't have US dollars, the Russia situation is kind of changing things. But for the average person who's holding currency, well, if you're thinking about it as like, what is something that I can use during a time of collapse? I personally think having agricultural land is one of the best ways, because you're averaging in on commodities where maybe you could speculate on like a commodity producer stock. You could speculate on like junior miners or major miners, but having your own lands and having it be self-sustainable, I think is just huge. And that really comes down to understanding that and having it in place before you need it. Because again, most people are completely reactive to these things, but I think being proactive and kind of making a plan, whether it's in Ecuador or another place, but I think Ecuador is very compelling.
And that's right, Riley. I mean, we are talking with people on the daily looking for plan B. They're seeing the writing on the wall and they're like, hey, we have to get out. So they start Googling where to live in the world with a better cost of living, as they see all these prices skyrocketing, concerns of war, concerns of everything, really, riots, all that stuff. And South America has always been a really good place to consider. They might have always heard that, Panama back in the day. And I think Ecuador is just now getting on the radar. But if we're going to be talking about food security, this is the spot, right? And so, like Jesse was saying, we have a growing season that's 365 days of the year. And right now we have a dynamic, and Jesse, I don't think he said this, but we live in Vilcabamba, Ecuador, and it's amazing here. It's perfect climate at 5,000 feet. So this valley, Malacatos, and a lot of other valleys are growing all the foods year round, and there's an abundance here. So people thinking, okay, plan B, I want to be able to like live and sustain if everything goes to nothing, everything goes to zero. Then what do? If you're in the cities, you're done, right? So a lot of people are, getting up to speed. All right, plan B, what do we do? And so we're really just trying to help people, give them all the answers and say, hey, come on down. This is the place to be. Check out our YouTube channel. There's really not much better. So now, can there be in the world? Sure. But I mean, we think this is a special zone, and people are starting to catch on.
Yeah, and I think the immigration process is quite interesting as well. Like you were saying, setting the ease of doing business, they're simple now. Bureaucracy and ease of doing business are kind of two separate things.
Yeah.
When it comes to actually the passport of Ecuador is very interesting, especially like complementary to a U.S. passport or Canadian passports. Visa-free access to Russia. There's a lot of and I think to China as well with Ecuadorian passports. So it makes things much smoother. And then just having your residency card, South America travel is a lot easier as well.